The US President Donald Trump is going to address a rally of supporters today to mark 100 days of his second term. As he departed the White House, he took a question about Australia's attempts to speak to him about his trade agenda. Of course, we're talking about tariffs. Our North America correspondent Lauren Day is in Michigan for us. Lauren, thanks for joining us. Now, Donald Trump's going to address this crowd in just a few hours, but what's he had to say about us?
Well, they were pretty brief comments as he was leaving Washington to come here to Michigan for the 100-day rally. But like so many countries around the world, Australia is just desperate for any mention that we might be next to get a trade deal. Of course, last month, Donald Trump announced these wide-ranging reciprocal tariffs on countries. Then he backtracked after seeing a lot of market volatility and announced a 90-day pause. Everyone still had a 10% tariff, but he announced this 90-day pause ostensibly for them to negotiate a series of trade deals with multiple countries. We're yet to see a single trade deal come out of that, or at least be announced, but there are a number of countries that seem to at least be the kind of front runners for those deals. They include India, South Korea and Japan. Now, Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent spoke this morning, and he said that there are at least 17 important trading relationships that the US is planning to hold talks with in the next few weeks. And of course, Australia will be desperate to get on that list. Here's what Donald Trump had to say to reporters earlier today.
Will you speak to the Prime Minister of Australia at all? Please. Mr. Trump. You'll make the call. The Australian Prime Minister is having an election this weekend. Will you speak to him about trade?
They are calling and I will be talking to him, yes.
That sounded like Channel 9's Jonathan Kersley doing his best to get some sort of substantial answer. We do love hearing about ourselves on the world stage, don't we, Lauren? Now, 100 days in office. Just remind us, how has the president's first little period back in the Oval Office worked out?
Well, James, it's hard to sum up, actually. So much has happened in the last 100 days and the pace has been absolutely frenetic. It's hard to keep up with, really. If you ask people here at the rally in Michigan, these are true believers, obviously. They're extremely happy with his performance so far. We spoke to some earlier who were queuing up for the event. They were really happy, in particular with his immigration policies, which seem to have really stopped the flow of immigrants through that southern border with Mexico. There's also been a lot of deportations, some of them extremely controversial, but people here were happy with them at least. But elsewhere, the picture is not so rosy. We've seen a series of opinion polls released this week that show Donald Trump's approval ratings have hit record lows. In fact, one poll showed that Donald Trump had the lowest approval rating of any president at this point in their presidency in history. The second lowest was also Donald Trump during his first term. And elsewhere, even in Michigan, the picture is not so rosy either. We were speaking with a car worker yesterday, an auto worker who worked at one of the many factories here in Michigan, and he had already seen layoffs at his factories and said that a lot of his co-workers and himself were really anxious about these layoffs that have come about since the tariffs were announced. And he was also really worried. He was planning to retire and was worried about the impact that the volatility on the market might have on his retirement savings, his 401k. He did have some hope, as so many people here in Michigan do, that there's a long-term plan that will eventually bring manufacturing back to America. Of course, that's the point of, in particular, the car tariffs. But if the opinion polls are anything to go by, there's a lot of people who do not trust Donald Trump to deliver.